Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris Blue Raven, and my special guest this evening is Rob Sullivan. And I will probably take calls, and you guys can text in questions the last half hour of the show, because I have a lot of questions to go through right now. So anyways, if you want to do that, the number is 347-688-2902. And, of course, you can freedom screen on Skype. And, Rob, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is incredible information. I really, really appreciate everything you're presenting and bringing to the table tonight. So thank you very, very much for all this. And do you think that the Freemasons or the Masons in general have been infiltrated in any form over the years by those who are perhaps more malicious and disconnected from source, with maybe a personal agenda based on control and manipulation?
Well, I wouldn't say anything like that. There have been dark characters involved with Masonry. We kind of try to keep an open, mind and, just admit people. But, certainly some members have been controversial. There's no denying this. I certainly don't deny it. I mean, you can even look to, when you get into controversial figures, depending on your point of view, J. Edgar Hoover, the former FBI director, was a Mason his whole life. And, of course, his record on civil rights wasn't the best. And of course you can get into, some of the more mystical, one of the guys who gives, I think he's a really interesting character. I don't have a problem with him, but I know a lot of people point to him, and think, oh, how could the Masons ever let this guy in? Was Aleister Crowley. I think Crowley's one of the more colorful people in history. I think a lot of what he was doing was great, but I know a lot of people, don't like him. I wouldn't say it's ever, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's been infiltrated or anything like that. I think a lot of people who are involved with it, myself included, use the lessons and try to, use it as a guiding force in society. So I could see it as that. What my book does talk about, I wouldn't say it's more of an infiltration thing. I guess you could kind of look at it like that, is when we talked about, I've talked about this on other programs before, and I'll mention it here because my book talks about it all over the place, is when you're getting into these higher degrees, they're being developed. You have the Blue Lodge coming together in 1717, the higher degree system, this rite of perfection. This comes out of Paris, France, in the 1740s, 1750s. The higher degrees are based on something called Ramsay's oration. It's a long story, but in a nutshell, the higher degrees are really being developed by the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and this is being done as part of the Counter-Reformation. If this may come as a surprise to some people, but at the Council of Trent, the Society of Jesus are charged with destruction of the Protestant Church, and anything that went hand in hand with it. And of course, Freemasonry is deism, but it's basically non-denominational Protestant Christianity. And of course, the Jesuits, see this becoming real popular in England. And of course, what they try to do is they develop these higher degrees as a vehicle to both thwart the growth of the Blue Lodge, but they're also using the higher degrees as a vehicle to restore the Roman Catholic side of the Stuart monarchy back to the throne of England. By the time the high degrees really reach the shores of the Americas, the Jesuits seem to be out of the picture on all this. The high degrees seem to have a life of their own and walking on their own 2 feet. But yeah, they definitely, it's one, I wouldn't say it's infiltrating, but they're definitely developing these higher degrees as a counter-reformation trick, as it were, to try to lure Protestants and lure Freemasons back to the Pope in Rome. You will find other nexuses between the Jesuits and the Freemasons. One of the biggies, and I talked about in the book, and it's sort of like on a Blue Lodge level, is of course the Carroll family. Daniel Carroll is a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He's also a signer for Maryland on the United States Constitution. And Carroll, it's Carroll's land that becomes the federal district. And of course, Daniel Carroll is one of the federal commissioners on the federal planning, and of course his brother is John Carroll, who is the Jesuit priest and the first Archbishop in the United States of America. And of course, John Carroll creates the Jesuit College, Georgetown University, which sits in the Freemasonic Federal District. So, you will see, this Jesuit and Masonic connection goes beyond the higher degrees as well. But I wouldn't say it's been infiltrated, but you'll definitely see a heavy, when you study, you will definitely see a heavy influence of the Freemasonry and the Hermetic tradition on material culture.
That's very interesting. And for those who may not know, can you just talk briefly about the Jesuits? I mean, who are they? Where do they come from? And what is their belief system? I mean, what are they really connected to?
Well, that's a great question. The Jesuits are founded in the 1500s by a mystic named Ignatius of Loyola, and what he does is it's this sort of real the Pope at the time, I couldn't tell you which one it was right now, but he forms the society, and the Pope gives it its blessing, and these are sort of what you would call the more hardcore God's Marines is what they've often been called, version of the Roman Catholic priesthood, the Society of Jesus, known as the Jesuits. After the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, the Council of Trent occurs. The Jesuits basically take control of it, and they are charged with what is called the Counter-Reformation, which is the eradication of the Protestant Reformation by any means necessary. We talk about the development of the high degrees as a Jesuit, ruse, I guess is the best word. The Counter-Reformation also has, I've heard people say, oh, well, this, the Counter-Reformation, this is evil, this is evil. It's just the Jesuits trying to use subterfuge to lure Protestants back to the Pope in Rome. They're basically what you would call at the time the Vatican version of the CIA is a good way to describe this. A lot of people have it in their head, and it's really a 21st century, 20th century thing. Oh, these are the drunk Irish guys who ran my high school. Well, back in the day, that's far from the truth. Many of these guys were mystics. One of the biggies, and one of his writings was, he was a Jesuit priest, and he was real big with the Jesuits, was a guy named Athanasius Kircher. And he wrote extensively saying what we talked about earlier in your program, that Christianity was really born on the Nile, banks of the Nile, not the Jordan River. Jesus was, of course, basically the Egyptian sun god Horus or Apollo, in the Greco-Roman mysteries. And he saw all these parallels between Christianity and the Egyptian mysteries. He was a mystic. He was a hermeticist. He was into a lot of mystical doctrines. So you will definitely see the Jesuits, a lot of the priests bordering on the mystic, things like that. And of course, they're charged with the Counter-Reformation. Of course, the Jesuits are pretty much behind the failed Spanish Armada invasion of England under the reign of Queen Elizabeth. These guys, the political meddlings are so great with the Jesuits that in 1773, the Pope in Rome has had enough of them. These guys are all but full-blown occultists at this time. And the Pope suppresses the Society of Jesus. And I talked about this on other radio shows, and I'll talk about it here, and I talk about it in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. And it seems to me that the Jesuits just go underground during the French Revolution and the turmoil of the whole French Republic. They reemerge after the wars of Napoleon. The Society of Jesus is restored. Of course, their power is curtailed heavily, but it's the group that they seem to be working under, or at least backing during this entire time, is a group that's founded in 1776, known as the Illuminati, also known as the Bavarian Illuminati. These guys are completely duplicitous. They seem to be anti-monarchy and anti-Rome, yet numerous Masons who joined this group said that the high-ranking members of the Illuminati were just Jesuits in disguise. They were all closet Jesuits. That's a theme that goes through the Illuminati, was that these guys were just all Counter-Reformation agents of the Jesuits working under another name. It's a controversial subject matter, but irregardless, the Jesuits do reemerge after the wars of Napoleon. They are restored, but again, their power is heavily curtailed. But yeah, definitely in the 17th, 18th century, the Jesuits are Europe's CIA, for lack of a better word.
Wow, that's really incredible. Yeah, you hear a lot about the Jesuits, so I'd like to clarify that. So they are, you say they are pretty much the Illuminati, or we're taking the name of the Illuminati?
Right. Well, what you have is the suppression of the Jesuits of 1773, and then three years later, you had this Illuminati group come on the scene, founded by this guy named Adam Weishaupt. And even this guy's name is an occult riddle, because you have the name Adam, who is of course the first man, and His last name, Weishaupt, is the formulation of two German words, Weissen and Haupt. And Weissen means to know, and Haupt means to command. So this guy's name literally means the first man to have knowledge. So I mean, even this guy's name is a sort of a cult riddle, and they're very anti-monarchy. I mean, the guy who runs, and they're very anti-Rome as well. And they're even they claim to be very anti-Jesuits. One of the characters who's behind this is the head of the Illuminati temple in Vienna, Austria, a guy named Ignaz von Born. Who wrote numerous treatises comparing the priests of the Jesuits to orangutans and monkeys. He was very anti-Jesuit. Von Born, incidentally, is the prototype or the influence on Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Ignaz von Born is Zoroastro in the Magic Flute opera. If you ever see that, you see the character of Zoroastro. That's Ignaz von Born, who was head of the Illuminati temple in Vienna, Austria. But at any rate, this one Prussian aristocrat joins it, a man by the name of Adolf Knigge. And Knigge's a Freemason, and he joins the Illuminati with the idea of, he's all for this, he wants to, level society. He's anti-Rome, he's anti-monarchy. He's a Freemason. He's also very mystical. He's sort of what you would call like the de facto leader of German occultism at the time. When he joins the Illuminati, that's when their ranks really swell with Freemasons, and he leaves it. He leaves it. I don't know, about one or 2 years after joining it, and he writes a treatise as to why he left it. And he says flat out, he says, "Look, I joined the Illuminati to be part of this this Masonic-like group." There was anti-Rome, anti-monarchy, anti-royalty. He said, I can tell you 100% this is the Jesuits under another name. Weishaupt and all these guys who are talking, this is all double speak. This is all, saying one thing, doing another. This is all the hand of the Jesuits at work. The Illuminati, the word Illuminati and the word Jesuit are interchangeable, and I'm leaving it because it's just the Jesuits acting under another name. And that seems to be the case, at least in the research I've done. Knigge was well read and would have no reason to say otherwise, and it makes sense because you have the suppression of the Jesuits in 1773. So it seems like the Illuminati, it's like that vehicle that preserves the Jesuits until the wars of Napoleon. Of course, when the wars of Napoleon end in the 1800s, in the 1812, 1814, the Society of Jesus is restored, and it's at that exact same time that the Illuminati sort of fades from the history books. As a group, the Illuminati is sort of off the history pages. What survives the Illuminati, and I talk about this in my book, is their political methodology, which is what you would call Illuminism. And you will see this in the early developments of the United States. You will see its influence on the development of the United States in its early days. And Illuminism is carried on really by this other revolutionary Masonic-like secret society known as the Carbonari. These are the charcoal burners of Europe. And these are the groups. This group is pretty much behind the revolutions of 1832, 1848. So yeah, the Illuminati has a pretty important influence, but it seems it was just the Jesuits working under another name.
Wow, that's just incredible. Yeah, it's amazing to me. And I do strongly recommend, if you have not picked up Robert's book, please do so. Phenomenal information. I mean, this is something you really need to access if you have an interest. And also, I wanted to kind of clarify, it's Sirius the Dog Star. Can you go into a little bit more specific detail as far as what is the symbolism to the Masons regarding Sirius?
Right. Well, what the parallel that you have is in the Egyptian mysteries, and you'll see this also in this federal district. I could talk about that also. But to answer your question, in the Egyptian mysteries, Sirius is, of course, Isis, who is the female wife, sister of Osiris. And you have to understand the Egyptian legend here. This is what's being paralleled in the Blue Lodge, where Horus is murdered by a character known as Set. In the Greco-Roman mysteries, this exact same character is known as Typhon. That's right, Typhon. And Horus or Osiris is dead, and to make a long story short, Isis possesses the secret name, the secret word of God, the secret name of God, of the Egyptian sun god Amun-Re or Ra. The difference is Osiris associates with the sun also. In the stellar pantheon, he would be the sign of Orion, and he also reflects the sun, but it's more of a materialistic sun. It would be like the life-giving force of the sun, where Amun-Re or Amun-Ra would be the spiritual, esoteric force behind the sun. Osiris is slain. Isis, his wife consort, is able to resurrect him by possessing the secret name of Amun-Re, and resurrects Osiris, and Osiris sires with Isis his solar stand-in, who is Horus, and Osiris becomes sort of the solar god of the dead at that point in time, and his replacement is Horus, who goes on and slays Set or Typhon. This is reflected in the Greco-Roman mysteries. Horus is Apollo, the sun god Apollo or Helios, who slays Python, who is Typhon. This is the great serpent, and this is, of course, where you have the Temple of Delphi, which is the oracle. The oracle of Delphi was built over is dedicated to the sun god Apollo. The oracle, the temple is built over the caverns where Apollo allegedly slew Python, which would be Typhon in the Egyptian mysteries. And if you're familiar with this is the famed oracle of Delphi, people would go for a prophecy. They'd go, she'd go into a frenzy and prophesize. Well, the frenzy was caused by the decaying fumes, allegedly, of the giant serpent in the caverns. The oracle would inhale these fumes, frenzy, and be able to prophesy the future. Well, in Freemasonry, that part aside, the nexus with Sirius is it's when the candidate, who is Hiram Abiff, is slayed or killed. Hiram Abiff is just another name for Osiris, who is the sun god who is resurrected with the secret name of God, which of course Isis possessed. And of course in Masonry, Sirius is represented by what's called the blazing star of Masonry, which is a pentagram. When the candidate, as Hiram Abiff, is resurrected, he is pulled up and he forms with the other Mason what is called the 5 points of fellowship. I'm really not supposed to talk about what it is, but if you Google it, it's you kind of put your body together and you're hugging the other candidate. And these 5 points, of course, form the pentagram. Pentagram is 5 points. So what you're allegorizing or what you're symbolizing is Isis, who possessed the secret word that she was able to resurrect Osiris with, just as these 5 points are resurrecting Hiram Abiff, who is Osiris. And of course, if you read Albert Pike, he says the blazing star of Masonry, which blazes in our lodges, is Sirius, which again was Isis in the Egyptian stellar pantheon. So you can form that nexus, and I do it in the book. I talk about it all over the place. So that's the nexus or linkage that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. I really appreciate your answer. And how does the Kabbalah influence someone on these mystical paths? If you can go into that a little bit.
Right. What you have with Kabbalah, what you have going on is with Hebrew Kabbalah. I differentiate this in the book, where you have Kabbalah being spelled 3 ways: Hebrew Kabbalah with a K, Christian Kabbalah with a C, and Hermetic Kabbalah with a Q. They all interrelate and overlap, of course. But really, one of the biggies with Hebrew Kabbalah is, of course, you have in it, this is reflecting these higher degrees, the Scottish Rite, these higher, the high degrees of the Scottish Rite, where with Hebrew Kabbalah you have 22 paths and 10 Sephirot. And of course the 22 paths also reflect the 22 major arcana of the tarot cards. And of course you take 22 paths with 10 Sephirot and you add them together and you get the number 32, which is of course the 32nd degree, the end-all be-all of the Scottish Rite. Well, if with Kabbalah, there's also, with the Sephirot, you also have this one hidden Sephirot, which is kind of a combination of the other Sephirots called Doth. And when you throw that in, now you have 11 Sephirot. So if you add it up, you get 33, which is of course the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite. And Kabbalah also ties into the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, where when in the Book of Enoch, when Enoch goes into heaven, he beholds Hebrew Kabbalah, the Sephirotic tree of life. And of course, we are told that this is in the Old Testament, Eve bites from the tree to gain knowledge. Of course, the tree of life, is of course Hebrew, is of course Kabbalah. and the apple she bites is, of course, one of its sephirot to gain knowledge, and it's explained to Enoch that the Kabbalah is basically the wisdom giver to Eve that she bites from allegorically to gain wisdom, and of course he's also explained, and this is paralleled in the Royal Arch Ceremonial, that basically the Kabbalistic tree of life is an emanation of the name of God, which is recovered in the Royal Arch Ceremonial. So yeah, you will definitely see a Kabbalistic influence both on high degree Masonry and the Royal Arch Ceremonial in particular.
That's very, very interesting. And so far as the imprint goes, what is the perception of, or your perception perhaps, of the world today, and what is their connection, the Masons' connection to order out of chaos, if at all, a connection?
Right. The concept of order out of chaos is a thing you have within Scottish Rite, and of course also, what it's trying to do is make sense of your life, and this is kind of what I was, when we went to the commercial break, I'll just go back to the answer I was giving there. Was when you're a Mason, you're going through these rituals. It's really Gnosticism is what it is. It's gnosis, where it's the rituals are trying to awaken this divine spark. And why it's so hard for me to answer questions like this is because it varies from Mason to Mason. What it means to one Mason, it may not mean to another, and it may be something completely different to someone else. So what you're really dealing with is like the imprint of Freemasonry upon a person and therefore upon society. It really varies from Mason to Mason. So it really wouldn't be fair for me to answer this because I don't want to speak for all Masons. I can only speak for myself, which for me was it was sort of, for me personally, when I went through this, it was sort of the sort of awakening of kind of having this interest in what I just went. For me, it was what I just went through and what it was trying to tell me. And it was because of that I was able to, get involved and really begin researching these symbols and what these, what they were really trying to tell us, and what these rituals are really trying to communicate. And like we talked about, coming out of the ancient mysteries, in astrology and, astronomy and, the symbols in religion and this and that. And that's really what it was for me. But for me to really sit here and say what it is for someone else would be impossible for me to do, because it's really each individual Mason, whatever that divine spark is within each individual Mason, it's up to them to discover it. And it varies, it's really going to vary from one Mason to the other.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well said. And how does Christianity tie into occultism? And why do you think so many brilliant minds of science and mysticism were murdered in the name of religion and God, which still goes on today on some level? What is your impression of that?
Well, when you get into Christianity, you definitely have, each one of these Abrahamic faiths, whether it be Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, have their own mysteries. Of course, the Jewish one is, of course, Kabbalah. And, Islam is Sufism, and then with Christianity you have this astrological mysterion, where with Christianity you have, are these real people or are these just astrological allegories? And I believe it's the latter. And of course, if you realize that in the early days of Christianity, Jesus was just understood to be, this sort of new spiritual doctrine that seemed to be heralding this Piscean age. I mean, it's really not until the Council of Nicaea in, 324, 325, I want to say, when, this story is transmuted into, literal history. But of course, you will see in Christianity, all over the place. I mean, just the Egyptian mystery schools reflected, the astrological symbolism. I mean, like we were talking about in the last hour with Jesus, being the Son of God. But if you substitute the letter U instead of O, I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, the Son is the resurrected Savior who, is born again every morning and, brings light to the world and defeats the Prince of Darkness of the nighttime sky, and, is assisted annually by the 12 houses of the zodiac, or the 12 apostles. The crucifixion, that has a lot of astrological, solar allegories to it. It's too long to get involved. I talk about it in the book. The death and resurrection, the virgin birth, which has to do with the constellation Virgo, the birth of the Son of the December 24th, which we talked about already. The Son meets John the Baptist in January. Of course, this is when the Sun enters the house of Aquarius. and is baptized in the constellation Eridanus or the River Jordan. I mean, it's all astrology from start to finish. And if you read a lot of the early Christian writers, they bear this out. The biggie is a guy named Origen, who is really one of the chief compilers of the New Testament, and he talks about this in his writings, that Christianity has this secret doctrine that's not to be talked about. There's two doctrines within Christianity. There's an exoteric, which is the literal history. This is meant to be devoured by the profane masses. But then there's this astrological mysterion that's not to be talked about, that's not written down, that's passed on orally. And that it is what it is. And I talk about this in the book, where it seems to me that the secret is being passed down through these groups such as the Gnostics. Then you get into the Cathars. Then you get into this other medieval warrior monk group known as the Knights Templar. They seem to have come into contact with this during their time in the Holy Land. Then you get into groups like the Rosicrucians, even the Jesuits, Illuminati, Freemasons, that are trying to symbolically tell this exact same story. Of these great secrets of religion, that it's really not literal history, it's more of solar astrological allegory. At least that's my take on it, and I have a whole chapter on it in the book. I think it's the longest chapter in the book.
Awesome. And what is your impression of ancient celestial races, or what some would call extraterrestrials? Now, is there a correlation between the Masonic ritual? I know we talked about astrology, but let's go further than that and look into like celestial races or species. What is your impression of that?
Right. It's a very good question to ask, because you have it on two folds. One is you have in Masonry, the name of God in Masonry, or what God is generally referred to, is called the Great Architect of the Universe. And we've talked about this guy named Thomas Smith Webb, who's a big-time Freemason. He's basically the creator of what's called the York Rite, or the American Rite. He writes this Masonic Monitor, and he actually mentions, he doesn't use the word extraterrestrial life, but he says in this Monitor, and I know it's there because I've read it. He says, when it comes to the Great Architect, he says, if we look up into the heavens at night and we see these stars, he said there's a plurality of worlds out there, and all the life out there is under the aegis of the Great Architect of the Universe. So even Webb is hinting at, in this Masonic Monitor, that there's, life out there on other planets, and it's all, being guided by the Great Architect. He is getting it from this Dominican friar, who was someone else we mentioned earlier, named Giordano Bruno. And in his writings, he uses the same word. I think he uses the word, he either uses the word infinity of worlds or plurality of worlds. I can't remember. I constantly reversing this. But he says the same thing. He says if you look out on the stars at night, he says each star is a sun and probably has a planet off of it, that has life on it, and all these are under, the guise of, the Divine Father, as it were. He basically is taking Nicholas Copernicus theories to another level. Got him in trouble big time because they wound up burning him at the stake. But even in Webb's Monitor, you get this concept of extraterrestrial life being, they don't use the word extraterrestrial. And then, of course, the biggie of them all is, of course, when we get into, of course, this Royal Arch Ceremonial, which is named after this biblical prophet named Enoch. And, of course, in the Bible, Enoch, along with the prophet Elijah, are one of two people to never die a physical death. They enter heaven in corporeal form, enter the heavens in their human bodies, and of course, in the ancient alien, world, it's not so much that they're entering the afterlife or heaven in corporeal form. It's rather they're being taken up by the extraterrestrials in the spacecraft. The angels and the archangels are not really that. They're actually extraterrestrial beings. And of course you have the archangels would be the good guy extraterrestrials, and the watcher group would sort of be this other negative extraterrestrial race. That's sort of the ancient alien take on it, or ancient astronaut take on it. Excuse me. When you get into concepts of Enoch and Elijah, entering the afterlife in corporeal form, is that real? Is it an allegory, or is it evidence of some sort of alien intervention where these guys are being taken away in the spaceships, or by the space aliens or the extraterrestrials, and being shown something that they are trying to communicate, are trying to communicate this extraterrestrial wisdom in terms and phrases that, this technology and this information that they really didn't understand, in biblical context. It's fascinating. I mean, it's certainly a legitimate, and logical interpretation. I really don't talk about it in the book, but I'm certainly aware of it.
Wow, that's really incredible. And I think this last half hour, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and if you guys want to text in a question, that's fine. Number is 347-688-2902. Please keep your question brief if you do call in, and we'll just take it from there. Okay. But yeah, this is fascinating. I just really very much impressed with all the information you're throwing at me. So thank you so much, Rob, for all this great data.
Well, let me just say also, thank you for having me on. And again, just real quick, shameless plug, www.robertwsullivan.iv, that's the letters IV.com. If you want more on me on the book, go right there. And there's links there also to all my social media. If you want to follow me on Twitter, check out my YouTube channel, Facebook like pages, it's all right there.
Awesome. Yeah, I highly suggest people tune in to your work, because there's too much speculation on the Masons in general, and after a while it just becomes this negative bleed through. So, if you really want the facts, I would suggest everybody pick up a copy of Rob's book for sure, without a doubt. Now, talking about the ancient Egyptians and the connection with the Masons, what is your impression of the ancient pyramids, and is that connected to the Masons in some way, would you say?
Yeah, well, what you have going on there is you have it's more speculation. I mean, at that point, but it's more speculation. But it has to be understood that what you have with the Egyptian, of course, is this element of the Egyptian mystery schools of Osiris and Isis and Horus, which we've talked about. When you get into Masonic history, a lot of the Masonic monitors. And I know Anderson's Constitution does this as well. And there's another work out there that it dates from around the same time frame. I forget the name of it, but it's written by a Mason named Martin Clare. And what they do is they trace Masonry's legendary history. And I stress that it's legendary. But of course, these guys all talk about how the pyramids are, the creations of the Freemasons, and well, not the Freemasons, of course, but the ancient architects who preserved this divine wisdom, and this knowledge is being handed down by God, and you'll see it in ancient Egypt with the pyramids, and of course, this turns up in the in the Gothic cathedrals of Europe, and now you'll see it in the Federal District. I mean, of course, that's not mentioned in the monitors. We're talking the 1700s. But they trace this legendary history, of the Masons back to Egypt, and a lot of them trace it back to the Garden of Eden, of course, where they'll tell you that the fig leaf that Adam wore was actually a Masonic apron. Of course, I have to underscore the word legendary history, but yeah, you will definitely see a clear, Egyptian influencer, impact on Masonry. And again, it's with the ritual, which we talked about with Osiris and Isis and Horus. But again, when you're getting into concepts of sacred architecture and things like that, the pyramids certainly have its elements, of sacred architecture. They seem to be aligned to Orion, and I know in the King's Chamber there's an alignment to Sirius there, and this again would make total sense with this whole concept of the dying and resurrected Sun Man, which again is paralleled in the Masonic Blue Lodge. So yeah, you'll definitely see an Egyptian tie-in there, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me. We have a question from Olive, which is Solaris asked guest has he researched the Gnostic Gospels? Gnostic Gospels. I'm sorry, I'm not reading this right.
The Gnostic Gospels.
There you go. That's it.
I think he's talking about the Nag Hammadi library. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I wouldn't hold myself out as a pure expert on it, but I'm familiar with Gnosticism, and it definitely ties into concepts within Masonry of divine spark and things like that. Gnosis and knowledge and gaining wisdom, and what your purpose is and things like that. And of course, just to shorten the answer down a little bit, you'll see a lot of Gnostic themes in movies. And again, this is the subject of my new book, which will be out in a couple months. The Cinema Symbolism book. You'll see Gnostic themes in movies such as the Matrix trilogy and the Truman Show and things like that, which is a separate analysis, but it's something I talk about in my new book. So I'm familiar with Gnostic themes and familiar with the Nag Hammadi library and some of the Gnostic Gospels. Yes, definitely. Okay.
Very good. What comes to mind, not to go back to the pyramids, but when you talk a lot about regeneration, I always think of the transfiguration at the cellular atomic level through consciousness, and I'm sure you're familiar with light body and some of the key components in ascension work, and it just seems like they all kind of tie in with that. And I'm wondering if part of your ceremony isn't related to the transfiguration of the atom and the spirit. to immortalize the soul on a higher level of consciousness? I know it's curious.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's definitely a valid point to say that the rituals are definitely trying to transform you spiritually. On an atomic level, that's not my bailiwick, but it's definitely for me the best way I could describe it. It's like, what is the secret of masonry? Well, it's inside of each mason, and it's trying to figure out what your divine spark is, and you were dead before, now you're brought to light, so now you can go about your work properly, or whatever that is. It's only you know it. That's really the best way I can describe it.
Well said. Yeah, I like that. And were many of the Masons, I think they were all land surveyors. I can't talk tonight. Land surveyors and map makers. Is that correct or no?
Well, so some of them were. That's definitely true. I mean, George Washington was the land surveyor, and of course, L'Enfant, who designed the Federal District, or was at least partially involved with it. I mean, he designed the template, but he was a Mason. We know he received at least the entered apprentice degree in New York. He was initiated into the same lodge as a Mason named DeWitt Clinton, who is of premier importance in this entire story. We won't have time for him tonight, but DeWitt Clinton is huge. And of course, a lot of the architects, behind, just the Federal District we're talking about, you've got a L'Enfant with the template. You've got Benjamin Henry Latrobe, who is the Capitol building. He's a Mason. Robert Mills, who does the Washington Obelisk Monument, he's a Mason. And of course, the White House, or Executive Mansion, is the product of James Hoban, who was also a Freemason. And incidentally, the White House, the Executive Mansion, is a replication of something known as Leicester House in Ireland, which also served as a Masonic temple. The White House is almost just a recreation of a Masonic lodge, as it were.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, a lot of esoteric energy in the United States, without a doubt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have a chapter in the book called "The United States of Freemasonry," where I lay out just that this whole country is just one gigantic Masonic republic from start to finish.
It truly is. Yeah. And with that being said, what is your impression of this country today? I mean, what do you think is going on, and do you think it's a positive?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think what we're experiencing now is, and even the Bible talks about this, is it seems to me that in the last 50 to 70 years, we basically have seen the end of, we're ending the age of Pisces, this one solar age that's ending, and we're entering Aquarius. And of course, we know, just even from base astrology, that we have cusp periods. The sun just doesn't miraculously jump around from one house to the other. So what it seems to me going on is we are on the cusp of Aquarius starting and Pisces ending, and I think that we're kind of in this tumultuous time. Of course, even the Bible talks about, when one age ends and one starts, there's always this, turmoil that occurs. I think that's really what the product of what's going on in the world right now. At least that's my take. And of course, for me, Aquarius, the age of Aquarius really won't be in full effect for at least another 100 and 155 years. Or 150 to 200 years, really, is what I was trying to say. But, because again, just because of the cusp phases, it's 72 years. I mean, the sun moves backwards 1 degree every 72 years. So again, it just doesn't just jump around from house to house. But, the full-blown age of Aquarius won't be here for 150, 200 years or so. But, that's what I think is going on in the world right now, is this sort of astrological changeover where Pisces is ending and Aquarius is starting. I even mentioned in the book, in the Royal Arch of Enoch book, that, the two heralds of Aquarius, that you've seen in this country going on in the last, 75 years or thereabouts, 75, 80 years, 100 years, is women being given the right to vote and the election of a first African-American president. I credit that to the coming age of Aquarius.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And just in another spin, I see a lot of negativity across the globe, and I see a lot of agendas with control and manipulation and the misuse of technology. And just to take it on a different spin, I mean, do you see all that fading to black at some point? And
it's too hard to say. I mean, it seems that you kind of have two things going on right now. It's like you have this control manipulation, but also you have this, to me anyway, this gigantic reawakening that's going on. Where people are just becoming, I don't even know if my book would have been possible 20 years ago. But now, you talk to people about this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, this is Aquarius. Oh yeah, that's the sun. that's Pisces. I mean, people are just so much more in tune about this now. And it just to me seems to be this changeover. But again, it's I think a lot of the turmoil going on in the world right now, is because of this changeover. But I think it'll sort itself out in time. And like I said, if you want to look at the Bible, even as an astrological point of view, it says that these astrological changeovers, when one solar age ends and another one starts, is always heralded or brought in with birth pains, as it were, and there's a lot of turmoil goes on.
Yes, that makes sense too. We have another question here from JMJ12. Solaris, please ask guest what his and Masonic thoughts are on hollow Earth. That's how it's worded.
I don't know if I really have any. I've heard the legend. I'm familiar with it. I don't know if I've seen enough evidence or anything like that to say that I'm convinced that the Earth is hollow. I know that apparently, just in the research and what I've heard about it, is there's apparently supposed to be a hole in the North Pole, I want to say. But hollow Earth is not my bailiwick, and I'd probably just answer the question and say I pretty much probably have not seen enough evidence to convince me of it.
Okay. Well, good enough. And let's see here. Are Freemasons knighted by a royal house or organization? I think you briefly touched on that before in the beginning of the show, if I'm not mistaken.
Are they what?
Are they knighted by a royal house or organization, Freemasons?
A royal house? No, not really.
Okay.
No, the Blue Lodge, confers your local Blue Lodge confers the degrees of 1, 2, and 3 upon the Mason. These Blue Lodges are state monitored. In the United States, there is no Grand Lodge of the United States of America. Each state is beholden to itself. So, for example, I'm in Maryland, so I'd fall under the guise of the protection of the State Grand Lodge of Maryland. But like right north would be the State Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. The State Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania can't bark orders at Maryland, and vice versa. Now, I will say this just briefly because it's a real long story. When you get into concepts of English Masonry, and of course, Masonry is born as a modern invention in 1717 in England, you will definitely have concepts of the Mason being the most loyal subject of the monarch. And this comes out of an illustration of Masonry written by an Englishman, William Preston. After the Revolution in America, of course, we break off from the monarchy. So, you will definitely see this, sort of the state Grand Lodges, acting away from the English monarchy. And of course, it's a long story. We don't have time for it, but there are very nuanced differences between English Freemasonry and American Freemasonry.
Okay, very good. And I don't know if I asked you this before or not, but I'm curious insofar as what your impression is of the New World Order.
Oh, I don't. This. What you're talking about now is, and again, this is really an Illuminati doctrine. At least I talk about it in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. I really don't shy away from it. Is what you have going on in the United States with Illuminism, with Bavarian Illuminism, and its influence on the United States is, when you talk about a New World Order, what it would be a concept of transforming the world into a perfected Masonic temple. And what you have going on in the United States is, and this is part of the anti-Masonry of the William Morgan affair, is what we were talking about is, after the Revolution, each state Grand Lodge is beholden to itself. And of course, this is what confers degrees 1, 2, and 3. But what happened was the higher degree system, and especially the Royal Arch, the Royal Arch degree, which at the time was really the most premier higher degree. This is pre-Scottish Rite and pre-York Rite. The higher degree system was basically allowing Masons to interact over state lines and formulate policy. So this concept of creating a new world order and transforming the United States into this perfected Masonic temple would come from the concept of these high-ranking Masons, these higher-degree Masons, working away from their local Blue Lodges, working over state lines to formulate policy and affect society. That definitely happened. I don't deny that. But again, this seems to have been undone with the William Morgan affair of the 1820s, where a lot of the Masonry's influence and power in the United States was diminished greatly.
Yeah. And what is your impression on ancient civilizations such as Atlantis and the theory of Atlantis? And does that connect into the Masonic ritual in any form or design?
Well, what I would say is this is, it's really hard to say, because we just don't know. But I guess what you could kind of craft an argument would be, I mean, I don't really get into it in the book because it's too tenuous or nebulous for me. Is I guess what you could say is it's these ancient civilizations such as like Persia, Egypt, and the related mystery schools. I guess that asks the next question. Well, where are they getting it from? And I guess sort of the idea would be, are they getting it from some lost civilization, i.e., like Atlantis or Lemuria or something like that? It's certainly possible. I know Ignatius Donnelly, who was, I want to say, aide-de-camp to Abraham Lincoln, had a book out about Atlantis. I know I have it here. I thumbed through it. If you want to try to make a nexus or form a link, so if you want to say, okay, Freemasonry is incorporating elements of the ancient mysteries of Persia and Egypt, well, where are they getting it from? And maybe you could say, okay, maybe from one of these ancient lost civilizations, such as an Atlantis or Lemuria or something like that. With these mystery schools, also mention the Druids as well. You could throw them into the mix. I talk about Masonry's nexus and tie into the Druids as well. It's where are they getting these ancient mysteries, these astrological mystery school, references from? Could it be in a lost civilization like Atlantis? It's definitely possible. I wouldn't dismiss it, but it's really not something I get into the book. But it's definitely valid, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that also. And I don't know if I've asked you this, but are there separate divisions in Freemasons or Masonry which clash in war with each other at all?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
The Blue Lodge is, when you're talking Blue Lodge Freemasonry, these are local lodges, so a lot of times they'll reflect the communities that they're in. So, you'll have local flavors, things like that. Where one lodge may, would be real metropolitan, and another lodge may be real rural. That's just standard. Again, when you're getting into the higher degree system with Scottish Rite and York Rite, these are not mutually exclusive. You can join both of them. You can join neither of them as well. I need to stress that. It's purely up to the individual Mason, which one he wants to go into, if he wants to go into either one of them at all. If you join the York Rite, you can turn around and join the Scottish Rite. If you join the Scottish Rite, you can turn around and join the York Rite. There it is.
Right. Excellent. And would you say that you're pretty well accepted insofar as Masons go? They're pretty well accepted in their own communities?
Am I or Masons?
Or Masons in general, I would say.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Masons do tons of community work. We do tons of charity work. We raise money for charity. The Scottish Rite has a learning center. Most of the Scottish Rite temples, in America, have a designated charity. I believe it's children's learning. I know the one in Baltimore is. Numerous, people in the community leaders have been Masons. Numerous United States presidents have been Masons, Supreme Court justices, doctors, lawyers, senators, congressmen, politicians, astronauts, Hollywood movie stars. We're all over the place.
Mm-hmm. You sure are. Even on the moon, if I'm not mistaken, weren't you dropping Masonic flags? There was a theory about that, or somebody made a comment about that.
No, that is absolutely true. I talk about it in the book. Some of the NASA logos are Masonic. I talk about the Apollo 13 symbol, and of course this is your 13th degree referencing, and of course the lunar missions are all Apollo. This is the sun. This is what you'd call the alchemical wedding of the sun and the moon, or Osiris and Isis, where the lunar missions are all named after the sun. And of course, Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, who was a Freemason, took a Masonic flag with him to the moon, and that is absolutely true.
That's amazing. That's really wild. That's incredible. It's awesome here. We're getting ready to wrap this up. I can't believe these 2 hours went by very, very fast. But I can't thank you enough, Robert, for being on the show tonight. It's been incredible to have you on. So informative. And let's go and review everything you have out there for people to pick up, your books, and tell everybody what projects you're working on.
Sure. Well, let me just say also, thank you for having me on. I really appreciated being a guest on your program. Maybe when the next book comes out, we can do this all over again.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have you back. Yeah.
I'm on the internet. If people are interested in me and want to find more out about me, it's www.robertwsullivan.iv. My name is the fourth. My name is Robert W. Sullivan the fourth, so iv.com. There are links there to buy the book. You'll see a thing on the right side that says buy the book. You can buy from my publisher, which is rsplaunchpad.com. That's all connected, all lowercase. But there's an oversized paperback version of the book. If you want it in ebook format, it's a 700-page book for $9.99, so you can't go wrong. It was on sale in December, but the sale ended. So you're getting a 700-page book for $10, basically. You can't go wrong. If you go to my website, there are links there to my Twitter feed. You can follow me there. There's a link there to my YouTube channel where you can watch videos I produce where I talk about the Royal Arch of Enoch book, and I preview my second book, which will be out in a couple of months, called Cinema Symbolism. There are also links to my Facebook like pages. The Royal Arch of Enoch book has a Facebook like page. Cinema Symbolism has a Facebook like page. And the book, Cinema Symbolism 2, which is a book I'm writing, you want to get an early jump on that. That also has a Facebook like page. I just created a Google Plus account. There's links there for that, so if you want to add me to a circle there. And there's email accounts there. If you have a burning question you want to ask me, I certainly will field emails. But links to my YouTube channel, Twitter feed. Again, if you just want to find out more about me, there's some passages from the book there also. And again, www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. And again, oversized paperback is available. Kindle, Nook, $9.99 for a 700-page book. You can't go wrong.
No, not at all. And, for anybody, like I said, anybody who speculates insofar as Masons go, you really need to pick up a copy of this book so you have more clarity. That's what I suggest for people who like to just rant, and go on about Masons. So anyway, so there's a quick question here from Jerry B. saying, does he have any theory on how Coral Castle was built?
I'm sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear that.
Do you have any theory on how Coral Castle was built?
No, I think I know. I think I know what you're talking about. This is this coral structure. I want to say it's in Florida, where this guy who built it was very old and was apparently using some sort of magical sound technique to move these giant stones around. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't researched it enough to be brutally honest with you to give you probably an informative answer.
Okay, very good. And I have a question. Insofar as technology, now that we're talking about technology goes, do the Masons fine-tune any their psychic abilities, which would include maybe remote viewing and perhaps an access to advanced off-world technology to enhance their skills?
No, I wouldn't be aware of anything like that. I guess you could craft an argument. Maybe there's been some Masons who have been psychic or something like that. But I'm not aware of anything like that going on within Freemasonry.
Okay, and
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just not aware of it.
Okay, and at what age does a male become a Mason, and do they need to be vouched for by another Mason?
Yes, the answer is they have to be vouched for by. Usually, you have to be recommended by a Mason. That's where the phrase "to be one, ask one" comes from. A lot of times, the lodge will set up a committee to investigate you. I want to say off the top of my head, this number may have changed. But if your father is a Mason and you are the son of a Mason, you can join at age 18. If your father is not a Mason, you have to wait till you're 21, I want to say.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, you come from a long line of Masons, is that correct?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mention that because a lot of my great-grandfathers and grandfathers were Mason. It actually skipped over my father. He is not one. But like Robert William Sullivan Jr. and Sr. were Masons. I know my grandfather or my grandmother on my father's side, father was actually a past master. That's a person who used to serve as a worshipful master. So yeah, my family comes from a long line of Maryland Masons, but it skipped over my father. Robert William Sullivan III is not a Freemason.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, it sounds like you've benefited quite a bit from just being on that path. So I applaud you for that for sure. I just wanted to make a quick announcement to everybody real quick here. Make sure you stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mickey coming up next, just sailing into the night. Next week, my special guest is Steve Colburn, and he will be discussing his latest finds in alien technology. That should be very interesting. So anyways, we have about a minute or two here before the music kicks in. But I do want to thank you again, Rob, for being on tonight. I'm really, really impressed with your information. It's been an honor to communicate with you. And are you still practicing law, or is that something you're not doing?
I practice it from time to time. Certainly I have a whole chapter in the book where I talk about the development of the legal profession in the United States, and you'll see some Masonic tie-ins to that as well. And yeah, definitely, my training as a lawyer, definitely shed some light and helped me write the book, because you'll definitely see some Masonic tie-ins with the practice of law, especially in this country.
Wow. So would you say there are a lot of lawyers who are Masons?
No, yeah, you'll find a lot of lawyers who are Masons. The founder of I know we're running out of time, but just real quick, the founder of Harvard Law School is a Mason named Simon Greenleaf, and he basically equated the practice of law and being a lawyer in the United States to being a druidic priest.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll definitely see some deep esoterica going on there.
That's really awesome. And on a final note here, insofar as Masons go in general, so what do you think their perception of people and the world and what they're trying to achieve through their own evolution would be positive, would you say?
Oh yeah, I would absolutely say positive. I've been involved with the Blue Lodge now for 16 years, and the Scottish Rite for, I want to say, 14 years. My interaction with it has only been positive. I only see positive influences on it, and I have no problem with it whatsoever. I think it's a very positive force in the world.
I do too, actually. Like I said, I come from a long lineage of Scottish Rite Masons on my mother's side, so I have a strong resonance with it. It's funny because I'm a mystical scientist. I mean, I studied a lot of different things, but I find that your information really dovetails into my own paths, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, well, I think that what you see going on in this with Masonry was, just real quick, with the William Morgan affair, Masonry kind of distanced itself from the mystical, but I see a revival of this now. I see many more people joining Masonry due to its mystical and esoteric tradition. I can tell you that it's definitely underway.
I see that. But there's a real quick question. Oh, I don't know if we can answer it, but why is the Blue Lodge blue?
Oh, that's just a color designation. It's generally the Blue Lodge and the red degrees are considered the higher degrees. I'd have to look that up for you, but it seems that way from time immemorial.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for being on the show. Everybody, have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.
Listening to Revolution Radio.